Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Madison Goodyear and I am a fan of The Forgetting Moon, Blackest Heart, and Lonesome Crown by Brian Lee Durfee, published by Simon & Schuster, Saga Press. Okay, that's not normally how I open my videos, but if you are not familiar, Brian Lee Durfee, who is the author of these books, also has a YouTube channel, and that's kind of his signature open. And I wanted to mention that because I'm going to talk about his YouTube channel a little bit in this review. So real quick, if you have not already subscribed to his channel, please head over that way and give him a subscribe and check out some of his content, because what I'm about to say is going to make a lot more sense if you are familiar with Brian Lee Durfee as a person and his on-camera persona versus him as an author. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. So I got my clipboard. Guys, I have tons of notes. I don't know if I'm going to go off book or if I'm going to read, but I wanted to make sure I wrote down my thoughts because I feel like I am in a little bit of a strange position here, because I want to make sure that I really convey how seriously I recommend this series to people, but I also am weary of overhyping it or turning people off because I'm so positive on it. So, like I said, these books are called The Forgetting Moon is book number 1, book number 2 is The Blackest Heart, and book number 3 is The Lonesome Crown. It has been submitted to the publisher, final draft, and we're just waiting on a release date from the publisher. But this is a completed series, so if you have trust issues with authors and you're just not sure if they're gonna go a decade in between installments, no, you can't get your hands on the third book right now, but you don't have to worry about whether or not Brian Lee Durfee is gonna flake on you as an author, because the series is completely written and we're just waiting to get the books the final book in our hands from the publisher. So it is a 3-book series. I'll show them to you real quick because they are beautiful and they are massive. I am going to comment on the size of them here in a little while. But this is The Forgetting Moon, and it has really cool cover art. This one is The Blackest Heart. I actually prefer this cover to the first one, but they're both really cool, and not just cool, but they're unique for fantasy. At a glance, you may not even assume that they are a fantasy book. They almost look a little more kind of sci-fi or something. But this is something where the cover is going to get your attention. And if you're gonna judge a book by a cover, these have really cool covers. Okay, so Brian Lee Durfee does have a YouTube channel. I mentioned that. That's how I found out who he was. I don't know if somebody recommended his channel to me or if I just found it, like stumbled across it. Maybe the YouTube algorithm gave it to me, but I subscribed to his channel, and guys, his reviews are hilarious, okay? This guy has a huge personality. He's a goofball. He is going to make you laugh in every single one of his videos. He gets way too close to the camera. He just is hilarious in the way he talks about, oh, I'm probably going to edit that out later, but then he never does. To be fair, like, he definitely gave me confidence to make my own YouTube videos, because I was like, I don't know how to edit. What am I going to do? And then I was like, well, Brian Lee Durfee doesn't know how to edit either. I mean, he does. Trust me, his skills are much beyond mine. But he just is very approachable, and his channel is just, like, so fun. But when I found out that he was an author, and I started looking into his books, I genuinely didn't know what to expect. Like I said, he's a goofball. He's a great guy. He's funny. But I was like, I don't know what kind of epic fantasy to expect from him. And so I initially bought the books, honestly, to be nice. I thought, I really like this guy's YouTube channel. He seems so nice and down to earth. I want to be supportive, so I bought the books. But I didn't really have plans to read them. Like, it wasn't on my horizon. And again, maybe this is bad to admit, but I just genuinely wasn't convinced that this, you know, chuckly, fun-loving, goofy guy could write something that would be to my standards. So that is on me for making this assumption, because it was wrong. But anyway, what I'm about to tell you is I read them and I was blown away. I ended up bumping them high up on my TBR because two of my friends from Discord, Scott and Brent, read them and they just highly recommended them. And not only do Scott and Brent have really good taste, but we have similar taste in books. And so when they made the recommendation, I took it more seriously. I thought, okay, maybe there is something to this. And also, Brian is just such a good guy. He's very interactive with his readers and his channel fans. He's very interactive, very friendly. And I just knew that that's the kind of guy that I would like to support. So after the recommendations, it shot up to the top of my TBR at the end of 2020. And Blackest Heart was actually kind of a black horse on my top 10 books of 2020. I didn't expect it, but after reading it, it just had to go on my favorite books that I read last year. It was one of the books I read toward the very end of the year, and honestly, I thought, am I going to regret this? Am I going to sit back in a month and look at that list and go, I think it was just recency biasy, or I was just so hyped on it that I had to put it on the list. But it has been over a month since I made that list, well over a month since I read the book, and I can't stop thinking about it, you guys. It's literally so good. So let's get into the breakdown. The first thing I want to talk about is the character work. Okay, so these books have character-specific POV chapters, which is my very favorite chapter style and POV style. There are a lot of characters, but I found them to be so distinct and well written that I didn't struggle with differentiating between the characters. I didn't have to constantly look them up in the glossary and that kind of stuff. If you're familiar with fantasy, especially fantasy that takes place over a big scope, you know that sometimes it takes you, a whole book to feel like you have your mind wrapped around this big cast. And it is a big cast, but I felt like they were so distinct that I didn't need to look them up and I never felt confused. Something I appreciate about these characters is he aged them all up. Something that's really common in fantasy is they write their main characters so young sometimes that I find it really hard to believe. Like I'm talking Robb Stark, 14 years old, leading armies and rallying men. Like, it's okay, I'll let it slide, it's fine. But so often it seems like these main protagonists or chosen ones or leaders start out in the story and they're like 12 years old. And I'm just not a big fan of that. These characters are mostly aged up. The youngest ones are late into their teens, and a lot of them are in their late 20s, early 30s. And I don't know why, just as someone who is in her mid 30s, I definitely appreciate that and can relate to it a little more. Fantasy races galore. Sometimes, again, and I hate to just keep comparing it to everything else, but I guess that's kind of what the point of a book review is. But again, so often in modern fantasy, I feel like authors are starting to shy away from really embracing all of the different fantasy races. And one thing I really appreciate about the series is he fully embraces it. I'm talking dwarves, there is an elven race, and there are mer people. You guys, like, they don't write mer people into books anymore, and that's a shame because they are freaking terrifying and badass in this story. So if you're a fan of having like actual fantasy races and it not feel like it's just another version of Earth, this is a great series because he really brings in all of those fantasy races. So there are going to be characters that you hate, characters that you love. There are unexpected background characters that turn it around and kind of become front runners and favorites. I really like the way he did that. I am going to go ahead and call this series grimdark because one of the defining factors when it comes to grimdark, according to most people, is a lot of these characters are morally gray. Like there's not one set main antagonist or one set protagonist. There is no good guys and bad guys. I mean, sure, there are some people that are better than others and some people who have like, terrible actions they take, but in the end, I feel like they're all doing it for what they think is good, or they're being influenced by something really bad. So everyone is kind of morally gray, but not in a kind of depressing tone. It just feels real. It just feels real to me. Okay, the plot. So this is a book that I kind of feel like it has it all, because so often I feel like there's a trade-off. Like either the writing style is amazing and the plot is really cool, but the characters fell flat. Or the characters are people that you're gonna love for the rest of your life and never forget, but the plot was only okay. I feel like in that sense, this book has it all. It takes some really common tropes like prophecies and chosen ones, and when you're least expecting it, it's just smart. It just flips it around. And yes, there's twists and turns and stuff, but they don't feel cheap or expected. At least they didn't feel that way to me. So he totally subverts expectations and tropes. And all in all, I think that this story itself is very unique, and it's not like anything else I've read. So I really appreciate that. Okay, world building and magic. I will admit that the magic in this series so far has been pretty light. I would say very light in the first book, and then it steps it up a couple notches in book 2. But the world building is absolutely incredible. I feel like he really builds through religion. In this story, there are 3 main religions, and then there's some others. I think there's probably about 5 or 6 total. And by the end of the second book, you're like, I thought I had this figured out, like which one was real, and then the others were just wannabes. But then at the end, you're like, well, maybe there's like truth in all of them, or maybe they're all wrong. I don't know, guys. The way he wrote these religions is so fascinating and interesting, and just really captivated me and kept my attention. Sometimes religion in books can be kind of boring, or it feels like they're trying to bring in modern day narrative. I didn't feel any of that with this. It definitely just made the world feel very different from Earth, from the real world, and just made it feel big and made it feel real. Some other things, I'll throw in some critiques and some downsides, because I'm not gonna act like these books are absolutely perfect. But in book 1, there were some times I felt like it was a little info dumpy. And I want to guess, maybe he can fill me in on this, but I want to guess that the reason for this is because he initially planned on this being a 5-book series. So when he outlined this and dreamt up the story, it was in 5 books. But when he got his book deal from Simon & Schuster Saga Press, they signed him to a 3-book deal. So he took 5 books and condensed them down into 3 large books. And so I imagine that some of the info dumping probably came from needing to condense. But again, it was never bothersome or felt, sometimes info dumps can feel just really like awkward and out of place. It never felt like that to me, but there were a few times that I'm like, okay, we're taking a minute to get filled in on history right here. So I guess you could count that as a criticism, but any criticisms I had definitely were gone by book 2. Book 1 was really good. Book 2 to me was just like, boom, way even better. Let's see, where was I? We were talking about world building. Ooh, get my clipboard a little close to the camera here. Okay, so along with world building, besides the religion, there's also secret societies like badass assassin groups, royal families, religious figures. There are all these complex things going on, but it never felt jumbled to me. It just made the world feel really vivid. Okay, does it doggo? Are there any animal companions? And the answer is yes, there are. Should you get attached right from the beginning? Read and find out. But there are some animal characters that will capture your heart. Battles, fight scenes, that kind of stuff. There's not a ton of action in the first book, but in the second book, The Blackest Heart, there is one of the coolest battle scenes I have ever read. Like, my mind was just like, is this happening? Am I reading this right now? You got to read the book too to catch what I'm talking about. But I went back and read it a few times because I was just like, can you do that? Is that a thing? Are you allowed to write that on paper? So, yes, a very epic battle scene and some really cool fights as well, like smaller, you know, hand-to-hand, not epic battles, but just smaller like fights and battle training and that kind of stuff. Okay, as far as rating goes, if this were a movie, it would definitely be rated R, okay? This is gritty, dark, morbid, violent. There is a scene in book 1 that will make you want to take a shower, okay? But it's awesome. Like, so cool. Like, you'll know when you get to that part. It's one of those scenes. I don't need to tell you anything about it, and you'll know. Also, just as far as like trigger warnings go, if you're sensitive to these kinds of things, please be aware that there are instances of and also like a history of sexual abuse and rape. It's not in the forefront. It did not make me uncomfortable. I mean, it made me uncomfortable because it was supposed to make me uncomfortable, but it's not written in a way that I found to be offensive or sexist or anything like that. It's just unfortunately a part of this world that it's a pretty dark place and I wouldn't want to live there. So do be aware of that. But yeah, it would definitely get an R rating. If I'm going to compare it to something, just for the sake of, if you like this, you may also like this. So please, let me preface this by saying, I'm not saying that these stories are alike. I'm not comparing them apples to apples. But I truly believe that fans of A Song of Ice and Fire and fans of Faithful and the Fallen are going to love these books. So it follows the same structure with the character-specific POVs. They are pretty dark. I would say it's as dark as A Song of Ice and Fire, but darker than Faithful and the Fallen. So again, I'm not comparing them. I'm not saying they're alike in any way, but if you enjoyed those series and you're looking for something else that, you know, a recommendation that would go along with those, I definitely think that's a very fair thing to say. Audiobook. Now this is a big one, okay, guys? The audiobook was excellent. Absolutely so good. To the point where I wonder sometimes if the audiobook performance actually enhanced my experience with these books. Like, Tim Gerard Reynolds is who reads them, and they were so good. His performance was like, I've listened to several books that he narrates, and he's always good. This is his best work, hands down. So if you are an audiobooker, absolutely pick these up on Audible or wherever you like to get your audiobooks from. They were so good. Absolutely an awesome performance. So the last thing I want to talk about really is the writing style and the prose. This is what really surprised me. Brian Lee Durfee has an absolutely beautiful prose. Without it being overly descriptive or flowery, it was just extremely talented. And there were times that I'm like, who wrote this? That guy, the Raiders fan? The guy who, he wrote this? I mean, absolutely beautiful writing. But like I said, I wouldn't consider it purple prose. It was not over the top. It wasn't too much, but absolutely beautiful writing style that just shocked the pants off of me. He's extremely talented, and I am just so excited to read The Lonesome Crown. I hope it comes out in 2021. That would just make my year. Let's see if I forgot anything. I was so nervous about doing this review because I just really, like I said, I really wanted to convey how much I enjoyed it without acting like it was perfect. Because sure, no book is for everyone, but I genuinely feel like this is a book that is, or this is a book series that is completely underrated, and so many fans of modern fantasy would really enjoy it. So do I recommend? Absolutely. The last thing I wanted to touch on is the size of them. These are our big books. And I don't know, look at them. One's ugly and one's not. These are really big books, you guys, and that can be super intimidating. But I want to tell you, because of the pacing being so immaculate, in my opinion, they read quick. I mean, this book right here is just shy of 1,000 pages. And I'd have to check my Goodreads to know for sure, but I know I read this in under a week, probably 5 days or so. I just couldn't put it down. It was paced so well that it never felt like a chore. It never drug on. And I read them both. I think I read them both in a week to 10 days because I just couldn't put them down. So do I recommend? Absolutely. I think that if you were to prioritize these on your TBR and push them up to the top, I don't think you're going to regret it. So have you read these books? If you have, please join me in the comments in encouraging other people to read them. And if you haven't read them, let me know why. And also consider, like I said, raising the priority on them, because I just absolutely love them. I cannot wait for the third book. And in fact, I think I'll probably even do a reread to count down to the release of Lonesome Crown, because I find myself thinking about them all the time. There were some things revealed at the very end of this last book that had me like, everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I figured out about this story is wrong, or I'm questioning it. Like, I was so surprised and just like, ah. So on one hand, it's kind of a bummer to have to wait, but on the other hand, I do not regret reading them when I did, because now I have all this time to get other people on board before the release of the third book. So grab these books, subscribe to Brian's channel, and let me know what you think.